First, welcome and thanks so much for being here, one and all, to our first meeting of the 2015 Technological Advisory Council. It's really terrific to have you all here. And particular thanks for those of you who did view this as not being an April Fool's joke, that this really was a meeting. I had a lot of encouragement from various ones, including Russ very recently, that's sitting at the table. You really should have come up with a new working group that we could establish that would be in line with the date that we're celebrating today, or change the entire agenda to something from 5 years ago or something appropriate like that. But I had a lot of encouragement from others who said that this is being broadcast and that there are people who have tried things like this in the past, causing panic in cities and other things like that.
We actually said this is Washington, D.C., and anything we do is believed here.
Okay. So in any event, it is great to have you all here, and it is particularly great to have the new members, or sort of new members, to our group. Jeff Forrester is here, I think. Where's Jeff?
Yep, I'm over here.
Oh, there you are. No, I can't see you around the corner. But Jeff is our new representative for Intel. He is replacing Kevin Kahn, as if Kevin Kahn could ever be replaced in any capacity. But we certainly welcome you, and I'm sure, Jeff, you will contribute in significant ways to our group here. The second person that we welcome is, you'll sort of wonder why he's being welcomed since he's been here fairly consistently, but Lynn Merrill, the president and CEO of Monty R. Lee and Company. Did I get that right? Wherever he is. Yeah. There we are. But he is here representing the NTCA, the rural folks.
Rural broadband.
Rural broadband folks, yep. And David Young, Vice President of Public Policy, is here for Verizon. And I did see David a few minutes ago, so I do know where he's sitting. He's replacing Ed Chan as the representative for Verizon. So we're delighted to have David with us. And finally, again, one that you'll wonder about, Jeff Mendenhall, we're welcoming back as if he had ever left, but there was where's your card? You need to be at the table, Jeff. You can't be sitting back there. No, come to the table. Do you have his card? Okay. In any event, Jeff was the long-term representative from Harris, and he is now back representing Gates Air. So we're delighted to have...
Which is the spinoff.
Which is the spinoff from
Harris.
Harris. So, yeah. So we're delighted to have Jeff. Jeff has continued to serve on the working groups while his status at the TAC table was a little bit in question for a while. But anyway, we're glad to have all four of you officially here and as part of the body. And with that, to make sure everyone knows everyone, let me make a quick lap around the table. And first of all, I am Dennis Roberson, and I think hopefully all of you are aware of that. And let me turn to Walter Johnston.
Walter Johnston, Office of Engineering and Technology.
Who similarly needs no introduction.
Michael Ha, Office of Engineering and Technology.
David Young, Verizon. Jeff Forrester, Intel.
John Barnhill with Gen Band.
Milind Buddhikot, Alcatel-Lucent Bell Labs.
Dick Green, Liberty.
Jack Waters, Level 3.
Brian Fonts, National Emergency Number Association. Kevin Sparks, Alcatel-Lucent.
Teresa Hennessy, Comcast.
Mark Richer, HSC.
Marvin Serbu, here as Special Government Employee, but I work at Carnegie Mellon.
Romani Pandurangan, XO Communications.
Lynn Claudy, National Association of Broadcasters.
Steve Lanning, Viasat.
Mark Bayless, Visual Link.
Russell Jurek, Cisco.
Adam Drobot, Open Tech Works.
Brian Markwalter, Consumer Electronics Association.
Lynn Merrill, NTCA.
Jack Nishelski from Qualcomm.
Rob Kubik, Samsung.
Tom McGarry, New Star.
Peter Bloom, General Atlantic.
Jeff Mendenhall, Gates Air.
John Chapin here as a special government employee, but I work at DARPA.
Eric Ikuren with Ericsson.
Pierre DeFries with the Silicon Flatiron Sensor, but here as a special government employee.
Rangam Subramanian, NTIA.
John Dobbins, Earthlink.
Dale Hatfield, University of Colorado.
Julian App, FCC OET. We also have a bridge. You want to ask?
Yes. And are there TAC members who are on the bridge at this point? If so, introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, Dennis. This is Brian Daly from AT&T.
I am so glad to hear your voice, Brian.
LLC.
I'm sorry, who was the second speaker?
Marty Cooper.
Oh, hey, Marty.
Marty, hi.
Hi. And Milo Medine from Google.
Milo, hi.
Greetings. Welcome.
Too many trips to D.C. lately. I decided to stay home this go-round.
That doesn't sound fair at all.
The weather's nice here, too.
No, it's good to have you, the four of you, on the bridge. Please do feel free to speak up as you have points of interaction that you wish to provide. In introducing
I'll try not to be shy.
Great. In introducing our first meeting of the new year, it is also the chance to formally bring out the set of working groups that we have chartered for the year. And I have to say, in my 16 years with the TAC, this very, very long period, this is by far the best slate of working groups that we have ever had from my perspective. And so I'm really excited and looking forward to the contributions of the year, those actionable recommendations that we're always focused on. But I really do feel very, very good about the topics and the impact that we should have coming out of these. And it comforts me to have Julie nodding next to me since he shares that history. I didn't get the full quorum of the 16-year crew with Dale and Marvin and a few others that have that long history. But it really is a stellar slate of objectives. And I think many of the TAC members have had difficulty sorting out which working group to participate in, and I know some of you were not able to select a single one, so you're on multiple, and I think that's really terrific, and do appreciate that a great deal.
We give you a pin at 20 years, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. The other aspect that may not be quite as visible is the engagement of the staff itself. The FCC staff undergird our working groups and really make things work from many perspectives, but really appreciate that fact, that engagement that continues to grow amongst the staff. And I think that makes what we do all the more worthwhile, because there is the knowledge that as we come up with recommendations and as we engage in conversations, the engagement is with the people who are on the ground doing the work day by day here at the FCC. So it is a terrific virtuous cycle that we've established within the TAC environment, and I will, in his absence, give considerable credit to our overall chairman, Tom Wheeler, for really engaging the TAC in the way that it continues to be engaged at this point. Having said that, I want to pass along a little bit of the work that is proceeding out of last year's recommendations. And Walter's quickly scrambling to grab those. But even as he grabs those, I will point out the obvious. It is not just last year's recommendations that are having impact. There seems to be a commissioners meeting on the 17th of this month that has a lot to do with earlier actions coming out of the TAC.
Could you post the slides, please?
There we go. But as virtually all of you, I'm sure, would know, on the 17th there will be action taken on the the 3.5 gigahertz proceeding that has had the multiple notice of proposed rulemaking and future notice of proposed rulemaking and the like over the last couple of years. But certainly that has a considerable thread that attaches itself to the TAC. And though he's not here, Jesse Russell is certainly one of the ones who pushed the notion, why are you trying to do this with WiMAX? Why not do it with small cells? And that change in focus on what the spectrum might be used for was one of the keys that unlocked that particular door. Certainly there were a lot of others, the PCAST group and so on, that had a lot to do with that, and the NTIA with their work as well. But it has all come together and is one of many things that have come out of this group and been contributions that have been made. But I did want to particularly talk to the recommendations from our last meeting in December. There was a considerable amount of effort that was undertaken by the staff itself, with the recommendations being reviewed by all of the bureaus and offices, and responses that were collected, and give a lot of credit to those who had the collection responsibility, particularly Walt. But there are now a set of objectives, and these are being tracked and progress being made, and we'll just quickly flash those out of the WTB, OET, CGB teams on the smartphone theft. There is an inter-bureau smartphone theft working group that's been established, and it's been very, very active. I quipped to some of the folks that I felt bad that I had not, at the start of this, that I didn't have greater engagement, and as the work became much more intensive, I became very glad that I was not involved in this, and I'm sure I speak for Brian and Rob, the chairs of that particular working group, in not being involved as well. But it's been a significant amount of activity that has been built on the base of the recommendations coming out and all of the work that particular working group undertook. I won't read all of the details here, but there is a considerable focus, and I'll actually get on to this more directly from the chairman at the end of this little piece of time. But the focus on security, on the database, and on the consumer outreach are clearly things that are in the crosshairs of the bureaus here. In the advanced sharing area, there's the identification of additional target spectrum bands for sharing that are underway, that have been in line with the recommendations that are there, and the work is proceeding with the NTIA and the PPSG to identify the target bands. And this one we didn't get the focus on this, but the OET, the Enforcement Bureau, and WTB all have focus on incorporating the recommendations on enforcement, which is the title that's missing on this one, that came out of the Spectrum and Receiver Working Group. But there has been a considerable flurry of activity, and some of you who have been close to the Enforcement Bureau are aware of some of the things that are going on there. Special kudos to Dale on this one for the work he did, but overall the Spectrum and Receiver Working Group that's really led to revamping of some of the plans and practices in this area, both in the short term and then in the long term, working towards this risk-informed interference assessment, and that's been the ongoing topic that is continuing to be focused on there. Finally, the transition to IP, use of the rural service providers as a test bed for technologies is something that's being investigated at this point. The incentive to construct the efficient middle mile networks is another piece that is an important recommendation that is being assessed and pushed on at this time. Work with the rural service providers to provide for better deployment costs and operational models is the key, and then maintaining the regulatory environment to support broadband deployment, particularly in the rural areas. All are elements that have come out of this working group. So
I just want to add one other thing.
Please.
This is another area where 2 years ago, the work of the TAC, where Adam actually was chairing the work group, first identified transition to IP as a major issue for the Commission. The Commission formed an internal working group focused solely on this issue. We've done a number of initiatives, including the $100 million rural trials, but this was an area that TAC flagged, the Commission took up, and it's a multi-year process of making these recommendations come out into practices or rulings that affect industry.
No, very good, because thank you for that, because the focus there on the recommendations from last year, but this is the last of a set of, I think, 3 years that we've worked on IP, if not 4. But it's been a long effort, and I think a very fruitful one that is continuing to move along. Particularly focusing back on the mobile device theft issue, this is an issue, as most of you are aware, that has captured a lot of the chairman's personal attention, as well as the working groups and all. Coming out of the meeting, some of you are aware, coming out of our last meeting, the chairman penned a letter to the CEOs of the major carriers encouraging them to both be aware of the recommendations of the TAC group and to request their input as to their perspective on those recommendations, which is, to me, an amazing concrete action, especially since the letter was sent out by the end of the day of our meeting. So the chairman walked straight out of the meeting and got the letter going and out the door. So it shows his focus on some of personal focus on some of our key areas, and this will serve as an introduction into the working group itself. But the 3 features now that are very much the focus of the FCC and of the chairman personally, focusing on the on-device features that can be applied to enhance the security of the devices is really a key, and there are a variety of those, and how to incent the owners of the devices to take advantage of these features as they're provided. And I think this is going to be a key area, and clearly the goal for the working group for the coming year is that we provide a draft template to describe how these capabilities, and in fact the chairman has a particular urgent request. I think this has been conveyed to Brian and Rob, but the goal is that these capabilities might be outlined as early as, or really by, May 1st. So this is a hot one for that particular working group. Brian can speak to the additional volunteers he'd like to have to move this along. The next item is one that has been viewed as and been identified as a soft spot in all of that, and that is the need to harden, pardon the soft spot harden pun, but the need to harden the IMEI, that is to say the identifier in the phone. Historically, that identifier, if we go way back, was just loaded into a register after manufacture. In fact, it could be loaded in a store, and this allowed for rather easy personality modifications for a device. It has been hardened, but it needs to be further hardened. The chairman would also like to have quick feedback on an early assessment, and certainly the long-term assessment on this as well. But this is one that I think really bears a lot of focus, and others have highlighted this as well. The final item is the database. As you recall from the last meeting, there is a database out there. The GSMA has provided a database, but there are deficiencies with that database as well. But it's very critical, not only for keeping track of what goes on in this space for law enforcement purposes and for keeping track of the phones and ensuring that stolen phones are not allowed access to the network and the like. But it's also a way for us to grade the efforts that are going on, because we should be able to track through that database the progress that's being made or the lack thereof as different industry and FCC initiated efforts are undertaken, so we can watch the rise and fall and be able to correlate that with the actions taken, as well as with the introduction of new hot phones and all the rest. So that's a third key item of focus, and I think Brian, being aware of this, will probably reiterate all these things, but I take a deep dive in this one, A, because it's a very important one and very hot on the chairman's mind, but also as a concrete illustration of the way in which the FCC is taking to heart the recommendations that are provided by all of you. So thank you one and all for that. And with that, let's move to the agenda for today's session. And
actually, let me put the agenda back up. I'm one ahead of you. I got Brian's talk up.
Oh, okay. Our agenda, as those of you who have been watching carefully, our agenda has been an enormous challenge for us. And we'll speak to that at the end of the meeting. This is a watchword for Walt, because we're going to do some modifications to the way in which we operate the meetings just to accommodate the expanded agenda. As some of you can remember from the way back when, we used to have one topic probably on average for every 2 TAC meetings. Under Tom, we moved up to the place of having 5 topics per year, and now we are at 7 topics per year. And through all of that period, we've had exactly the same agenda slot, 1 to 4, 4 times a year. And that is no longer working for us. So again, we'll talk more to the details of that at the end. Walt will talk to those details. But from an agenda standpoint, you've now had your opening remarks and the chairman's overview. And so what we'll be going through, and we have the speakers nicely ordered across the table from me, but we will talk through the mobile device theft prevention, the cybersecurity initiatives, the long-lived spectrum and receiver activities. The first, well, these 3 plus Form 477 activities are all continuing working groups, and this is part of how we've gotten to 7. We have so much fun doing the things that we're doing, it's hard to let loose of them, and at the same time, we need to introduce new topics as well. The 3 new topics, the roadmap for future unlicensed services. There's an enormous amount that's going on in the unlicensed space, even as that spectrum region is expanded, and really digging into that is a critical item for us this year. The next generation internet services, very non-controversial area, as we all know, but very, very important area, because the internet is not what it used to be way back when. It is really changing, and sinking our teeth into that is a big one. And finally, the one I think that has gotten probably the most energy is the although I don't know whether I really dare say that, the game-changing technologies. Adam says what you have 20 people and 40 ideas for this one or something. More ideas than that, yeah. But it really is a great one to explore, and we've had various versions of this over the years, but digging directly into the game-changer kinds of technology. What's really going to change the way we even think about the regulatory activities of the FCC based on the technology drives is a key one. So that's our roadmap moving forward, and we will jump straight into the mobile device theft, and Brian, I guess, is going to be the main speaker, is what I've heard, although Rob, are you going to share it?
You heard right, Brian.
Okay, Brian's going to be the main speaker. Rob is here as well, I'm sure, to input. With that, Brian, you are on duty.
Thank you, Dennis. And if we could bring the slides up on the screen. What I'd like to do is give an overview of the mobile device theft prevention working group. If we can switch off the title slide to the agenda, I would like to address the mission of the working group, a recap of our findings and top priority recommendations that we presented in the December meeting, the progress on mobile device theft prevention, and finally our work group plan for 2015, which is pretty much an expansion of what Dennis had previously discussed. Next slide. Basically, what the working group will do is continue the work that we started in 2014 and further expand on some of the recommendations that we had generated. There's going to be an emphasis on some of the longer-term initiatives to combat more sophisticated theft scenarios, and looking at recommendations on some of the next-generation anti-theft procedures, hardening of existing device identifiers, and also potentially look at the possibility of new and more secure identifiers. Look at security mechanisms with higher customer acceptance, such as biometrics. Have a focused analysis on the overall theft ecosystem, including how the devices are re-entered into the marketplace, for example, through the recycling industry, and further recommendations to improve on the reporting mechanisms. We are going to look at other classes of devices beyond the smartphones and see how some of these solutions and mechanisms can be put into place to look at extending to theft prevention mechanisms to those devices. And finally, look at the assessment of progress made in the area of device theft prevention and how some of these recommendations have been applied. Next slide. The working group participants listed here is basically we've got the chairs and co-chairs listed as you see on the left side. The FCC liaisons, and Dennis, of course, is the chairman. And we have a large number of participants for this very a topic of interest to many different stakeholders. Next slide. Recapping what we did in 2014, what we found was there was no common national framework for smartphone anti-theft mitigation, and there are no current official national or international smartphone theft statistics. The database that was mentioned earlier by Dennis, that's run by the GSM Association, the U.S. operators have only been using this for the past few years. There's a large number of law enforcement agencies that makes aggregation of mobile device theft data a significant challenge, and improved data collection is necessary to understand if measures are being implemented or effective. We did obtain preliminary data through 22 police jurisdictions supporting the view that smartphone theft is a major issue, and however, we were unable to determine the destination of the millions of smartphones that are stolen per year, actually where they are going. Next slide. There's various voluntary commitments and best practices that have been developed on smartphone theft mitigation through various industry groups. The major manufacturers and OS providers committed to providing device-based solutions by July of this year. Not all mobile service providers have adopted these commitments, however, and best practice do need to be enhanced over time. The bottom line is there's no silver bullet that was found that will eliminate smartphone theft, and a complementary suite of technical and operational mitigation techniques has to be made available if we're going to have any impact on the theft issue. There is evidence that implementation of solutions is impacting criminal activity, and I've got a slide on that in a moment. And secure technology solutions are required to ensure those there are unique identifiers on all smartphones, and this again goes into the hardening of the identifiers that Dennis mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. Continuing on with the recap of the 2014 findings, law enforcement was found to need a better understanding of the tools that are available to aid theft investigations, and more user-friendly tools will be a critical component of a successful solution. Consumers must understand and the benefit to adopt these theft deterrent measures, and opt-out solutions should be the norm going forward. And again, that's one of the points which Dennis had mentioned from the chairman as a focus for this year as well. And the most effective anti-theft messaging comes from local law enforcement, and service provider and manufacturer outreach is needed to supplement the law enforcement messaging. Next slide. The top priority recommendations focused on the areas that we see on this slide, looking at the national framework, deploy and continue to evolve technology solutions, engaging consumers, engaging law enforcement, and engaging the international community. If we go back to the December 2014 TAC meeting, we did expand on the recommendations in these areas and had some additional recommendations. I won't further elaborate on them here, other than to say that these have been presented as of December. Next slide. So where has progress been made on mobile device theft prevention? We do see industry-wide recognition of mobile device theft, and solutions are being implemented. We do have voluntary commitments both from carriers and manufacturers to implement solutions, and the industry recognizes this issue and is actively addressing it. The solutions must take into account the interests of consumers, industry, and public safety. And there is progress in mobile device theft being made. There's data that has been recently reported that thefts are down 40% in London, 22% in San Francisco, and 16% in New York City. And there's a link to a press release from New York that cites these numbers that they've seen, and many of these can be attributed to the solutions that have been put in place and have been discussed in last year's TAC. Next slide. So our media objectives for 2015 really focus on the areas that Dennis mentioned the chairman would like us to concentrate on and have some immediate action. The first is to look at a national template geared toward on-device features like password protection, remote wipe and lock for mobile device theft prevention. The goal is to reduce complexity and significantly increase consumer use and reporting of theft. And in that, there's also the issue of Wi-Fi only device use. While some of these solutions are available to devices that are on cellular networks, we want to broaden the horizon a bit and see what can be done for devices that are used on Wi-Fi networks. The second area is the device identifier hardening, looking at obstacles to make recommendations for near-term action. Again, device identifier hardening was one of the items that was studied last year, and some recommendations were put into place, but we'd like to take a focused effort in the near term and look and see what can be done to make further recommendations in this area. And then, as Dennis mentioned also, one of the areas is the stolen device database. Currently, there's the GSM Association database and other solutions out there, but what the task for the working group will be to look at specifications for an effective database, to look at comprehensive listings of stolen devices on a national regional basis, reporting and use by key stakeholders, scaling so that it's available and used by all service providers, have the broadest range of future devices capable for input to the database, and potentially look at off-net use of stolen devices, again, tying back to the Wi-Fi only devices. So, Dennis, that concludes the presentation and really addresses the issues that the chairman has asked us to focus on, and we understand the timelines that the chairman has put forward for May 1st for some of these items, and we'll diligently get the working group together and work on those items.
Any questions? Okay. Maybe I'll just emphasize the fact that the chairman's given this work group a special task in that he's looking for input over the next month and a half that he can take into discussions he expects to have directly with other industry stakeholders. So it's a great opportunity to refine the suggestions that were made last year and give the chairman some talking points in terms of things he hopes industry can step up to in terms of the challenge of combating stolen devices. All right. With that, we're going to move now to cybersecurity, and I believe, Romani, you're going to, let me get your slides up.
Could we pass around the clicker? Thank you.
This is a demo of hot potato routing.
Not throwing.
It's the slowest way possible. Remember, the entire commission only has one of those. That's correct.
Okay, so the working group is cybersecurity. Is one of the continuing topic from last year. And the chairs are Paul Steinberg and Shahid Ahmed. Both could not be here, so I'm standing in for them. Okay. At this meeting, we want to present what we could put together on a sort of these tentative items and directions and deliverables. We seek advice from the TAC entire group, saying, are we going the right direction, or are these the right source of input, or are we missing something, and what are the synergies we have to work with? Some of them we are able to see with other working groups on if there's some overlap with some of the topics. So this year, I think the different from a very open-ended question, cybersecurity has got 3 topics, and they were fairly specific areas to focus on. The first topic was simplifying smartphone security. Now, we divided the teams into 3 sub-working groups to match these 3 topics. The first sub-working group will be run by Martin Dolly of AT&T. And, topic 1. Okay. So the question is really about a little bit of history about security checker, but then later on in the year decided to go look for other apps providers. But the question specifically was, can TAC be the working group can be tasked to come up with recommended generic requirements which promote the availability of features such apps that coverage a set of common security and privacy concerns. So that's the kind of the topic itself. And the plan of attack was, this follows a very similar format for all the 3. The first is the directionally where we think we are going, what direction we're following. The second part is really although we had a week to discuss, we put together some tentative key deliverables. And the third part is really what are the source of input we intend to consult and take input from. So that's the format for all the 3 sub-working groups. The first working group, the proposed scope and direction. So really to develop a very generic, taking from the question, is a platform agnostic baseline of controls and recommended settings and common way of reporting on devices, describing security aspects of that, and the permissions, etc. The tentative key deliverables, we are looking at 3 deliverables for this working group. June, primarily focusing on analysis and discovery. What are the permission definitions? What, in more educational saying, if you turn on this permission, what does it mean in terms of securities and exposure? And developing some sort of a security controls baseline and recommendations on alternate application sources, that is, unknown sources or Android enterprise or developer delivered on iOS, not necessarily from the OEMs or anything, but there may be other applications. And also point out the risks of things like jailbreaking and rooting devices, etc. September's target is to suggest a feature list that promote device security and privacy. And then finally, the recommended actionable recommendations and requirements for features that promote device security, privacy, etc. So that's kind of overall directions and deliverables. Key source of input, this will be just the industry input, standard development organizations, equipment vendors, platform representing Google, Android, Apple systems, and of course service providers and carriers, and security solution providers like Lookout and NQ, which were mentioned in the study topic, and the device OEMs. So this is the kind of outline as we see for this year's study on this topic. And The next topic, should go ahead, the next one, sub-working group. Okay. The next one was securing IoT consumer products. There was a lot of work done last year by Russ and David on the IoT. Security was part of that, but this time it has been separated out to get more focus on the cybersecurity for the IoT. And also the title is consumer products, so that seems to be the focus. So what are the security challenges engendered by many of these new technologies like Wi-Fi, Zigbee, and others? How is the industry kind of coping with that? There are some challenges where there are resource constrained, inexpensive devices. So how do you protect them? What are the security challenges on the gaps? And what are the potential steps we can take to recommend to the FCC? So that's the kind of outline of the topic. And this will be led by George Popovich from Motorola. Again, the proposed scope and direction. First, we want to see eliminate the work done last year by Russ and David on the IoT. A lot of work was done. And then look at the cybersecurity challenges because of the Internet of Things are emerging, evolving. What are the recommendations we can think about focusing on the security of these consumer products? Understand the security challenges, especially physical security challenges when it's unsupervised, and also the challenges of resource-constrained devices. What are the challenges today? How does the industry cope with that? Best practices, and see identify any possible gaps, and how do we close these gaps, particularly as the IoT devices permeate in all our consumer products as a consumer society, as well as critical infrastructures. 3 deliverables are forecast. June, deliver a survey of the industry landscape, existing best practices, standards, consortium efforts, really kind of what's happening in the industry, state of the industry. September target is to identify the gaps in the IoT space, how advanced technology can address these gaps. And the last one is coming up with these recommendations, the role that we played by the FCC, changes in the security, privacy, and resiliency of IoT devices and systems. The next topic is fairly well, spelled out in great detail. This is about. Before you go there. There's a source of input, which is again a NIST on the special working group, public working group, and the FTC Office of Technology Research and Investigation, Industry Internet Consortium. There are a lot of consortium on this IoT. Thread group, focusing primarily on the home devices, and the OWASP top 10 projects, and of course leading vendors in the IoT technology like Intel, Microsoft, Windows, etc. So these are the industry players from whom we hope to collect input that will form the basis for recommendations. The last sub-working group, the securing SDN. So SDN, software-defined networking, and of course it's kind of closely related. Network function virtualization is an evolving architecture in the industry, and pretty much every vendor, service provider, everybody is looking at that, and they're working on various stages of this development, anywhere from discovery to proof of concept to trials and implementations. This topic is specifically about security aspects of the SDN, because there's also the future game-changing working group also has mentioned SDN NFV run by Adam and Nomi. So there's some we have to keep in sync with that working group, because the working group looking at probably the architecture. This is specifically about security. So again, the format is the scope and direction. So first we want to look at the SDN NFV architectures, and it produces on one hand, when you logically centralize the control elements, some may think it's increased exposure for this. However, this also provides a lot of flexibility in bringing in dynamically security protection mechanisms because of the architecture of the flexible way you can steer flows. But there have been lessons learned from previous control plane protocols like BGP and DNS. So that's another valid input to take into account. And also look at the software-defined security. The software-defined becomes very extremely used to term, but the software-defined security, kind of automation, etc., are the key aspects of that. We want to look at that, to research that, to see how will that help in this for the work of the study group. There was another specific topic raised about the trade-offs between embedding security within the network versus in the hosts and servers outside of the network. Whether either or in some combination, this is something we'll take a look at that. And see whether there are any possible gaps, industry best practices, etc., and see how we can ameliorate these potential gaps. And of course, explore what the role FCC should play in this evolving architecture and the security aspects of this evolving architecture. The deliverables, looking at only 2 deliverables. One is September, where we combine the industry landscape of all the network architecture related security approaches and challenges, and the industry best practices, more like what's available today. And the December deliverable, we hope to deliver what the recommended role for FCC and what are the actionable recommendations to facilitate enhancing the security, privacy, and the resiliency of these evolving architectures. Again, we plan to consult all the industry stakeholders, and of course consult the NIST, the premier standards and technology organization, leading vendors. Many of them are members here. They've all been doing tremendous amount of work and investigation and everything in SDN and NFV. Lots of standard development organizations also working on that. There are a bunch of industry consortiums, Open Network, Open Daylight, Open NFV, etc. And service providers, as I mentioned earlier, there are various stages of discovery to deployment. We hope to consult, get some valuable input for this study item. So that's all I have for this cybersecurity group.
Very good, and we thank you for standing in for the missing Paul Steinberg and the missing Shahid as well. So, Romani, you're listed as the co-chair, but you clearly are providing the leadership, so we appreciate that. Any questions from anyone using the time-honored? Aha, there you go. Pierre is first.
Oh. Thank you. This is an amazingly impressive outline of work. One of the things that struck me that you do very well is listing the sources of input. Particularly with the first 2, end users and consumers are the key focus, with smartphones and consumer IoT. And I wondered how the group was thinking you would actually consult with end users or people who claim to speak for end users, not people who sell them stuff.
So there are consortiums and communities are there, so which represent perhaps not only vendors but also end users and others. So rather than only the vendors, but all those community groups could be possibly source of input to get what the consumers are, what their take on this one.
Brian.
Okay, just a couple of comments. Actually, on that point, most accredited SDOs are required to have some sort of outreach to users, which is historically very hard to accomplish. And Well, we try all the time to get kind of real consumer input, and it usually doesn't work very well, honestly. But you sort of use proxies for it, basically. CEA is working on a white paper, sort of a best practices on security, so I'll connect with you after and get that provided to the working group. We're kind of doing final edits now on it. And there are some other groups I'll pass along. You mentioned Thread, but there are some other very similar groups that you'll want input from.
Any other questions or comments? Don't see any cards up. We're moving along at a good clip, so pass things on to Spectrum and Receiver, and Lynn Cloudy, you're on. Do you wish to advance yourself, or you want Walt? Great.
I can do it.
I forgot about that.
I'm empowering myself.
Yeah, I had to lean over and ask Walt, why isn't Romani using the clicker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the revised mission of the working group for this year, and this is a continuing working group, so the mission is a continuation from last year's work, and that is namely to make recommendations in the areas focused on improving access to and making efficient use of the radio spectrum from both a system and a receiver perspective. Second, to provide support as the Commission considers TAC recommendations that are related to statistical aspects of interference. And third, to conduct analysis and make recommendations related to enforcement issues in a rapidly changing RF environment where sharing is prevalent. This is the preliminary list of participants in the working group at the present time. It includes people from last year and some new participants as well, and it will probably be expanded as the work gets started. Notably, Greg Lappin, who has represented the Amateur Radio Relay League on the working group for the past several years, has, in a weak moment, stepped up to be a co-chair of the group, and he is a very smart guy who took the phrase April in Paris to heart and is not here at this meeting today. So face-to-face congratulations will have to wait, but we're looking forward to his continued expertise and his leadership in the group.
Well, the question is this an April Fool's for you, as he...
We will never know. These are the particular areas of focus for the working group, which are familiar and continuing themes. First, to develop recommendations about statistics of interference and risk-informed decision-making, and I'll have more about that in a moment. Second, to recommend strategies for interference resolution and enforcement in the changing RF environment, and to propose methods for characterizing the operational impact to receiver performance as a result of interference. So I'll briefly describe each one of those one at a time. With risk-informed interference assessment, the goal is to assess the overall risk of interference as the combination of both the severity of the effect of an interference event with its likelihood of occurrence. So that's as opposed to simply basing interference control on a so-called worst-case analysis, which has been the traditional technique. We have briefed the TAC on this concept several times now, and in the first week of March, we distributed a document by email on the subject to the TAC titled A Quick Introduction to Risk-Informed Interference Assessment. It's essentially a 14-page introductory paper. It was principally authored by Pierre DeVries from Silicon Flatirons, and it was vetted and enhanced through discussion in the working group. We had asked for any specific comments or edits on the paper by about a week ago, and indicated in the note that our intention was to ask for approval at this meeting to be able to post the document on the TAC website. We received some comments for further discussion, but none of them took issue with the document itself or any edits for the document. So, Mr. Chairman, if it would be appropriate at this point, we would like to submit a motion for the TAC to approve this document for the purpose of posting it on the TAC website. So I'd so make that motion.
Okay, is there a second for that motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. I think you have been given the green light to proceed. It shall be so posted.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Walter, in advance. We have a continuing action on interference resolution and enforcement, and the goal is to address the modern changing RF environment and to recommend any new appropriate strategies that might come out of that. Also, the Commerce Spectrum Management Advisory Committee, CISMAC, has a parallel activity in this area since frequency sharing in the federal sector with federal incumbents is a targeted policy direction, as TAC members are well aware. You'll recall that we presented and published a white paper that was principally authored by Dale Hatfield through the working group last June. That was is posted currently on the TAC website. And one of the items we'll be following up on is the potential benefits of using emission designators and transmitter identifiers to help with the identification problem of interfering sources as interference becomes harder and harder to discern in the normal conventional ways. Our third area of focus is on receiver performance, and our goal is specifically not to recommend mandated receiver performance standards, but it is more to have a uniform method or ways to characterize how receivers are going to behave in shared spectrum environments to have a common language for how to measure receiver performance. And we'll take a view on how things like out-of-band rejection for receivers should be balanced with out-of-band emissions for transmitters in order to create or to prevent interference at the receiver. And of course, in that space, there are cost versus benefit trade-offs that have to be considered and weighed along with the various numbers. So that is the end of our status report at the beginning of this meeting cycle.
Great. I will make a quick comment. We very quickly dispatched the motion and the agreement and all. I would just like to highlight that these documents, as we do have the various white papers that are presented, put forth, and then put forth for approval, this is not simply a perfunctory activity. By your vote, you have indicated that you own the output of that document. So perhaps I should have said that before you voted. But it is key. So I encourage you all, as the various outputs of the various working groups occur, to take the time to read the documents, provide any inputs that you may have, and certainly when we come to a vote, I hope it will always be unanimous as it was this time. But it is something that when it goes out that you all do collectively own, and you should feel proud of that ownership as well. So thank you for the work of the group in bringing forth that particular white paper. Now, any questions, comments about the work that Lynn has described? Certainly in the working group this morning, there was a great deal of discussion about these topics. But seeing none, we will continue on. And Steve Lanning, you are up on our probably the most cryptically titled of our working groups, Form 477. It almost sounds like a sci-fi movie or something.
I take no credit for the name. That's forward. Okay, great. So this is a continuing group from last year, And we didn't really make that much progress last year because we had hoped that there was going to be some software to test, and that's part of the reason for it continuing on this year. I think this thing's not advancing. Oh, it is. I'm not looking at the right thing. So I figured that out. As we spin things up, we'll be going around and recruiting more people because we obviously need more input like we had last year. But for now, these are the people who have volunteered, and others I probably should have highlighted. So our charter is to validate the requirements that have been developed for the application to take 477 inputs in a new way. The development of this platform is dependent upon some IT funding. So how much work there's going to be and how long it's going to continue does have a contingency. We expect to have a diverse range of service providers participate, just like we did last year. And the successful completion of this trial is going to allow the next phase of the Commission's data collection and infrastructure to be deployed and support broadband data. In particular, one of the first things that we would like to see that go towards is a broadband map. So our key areas of focus are really just data accuracy and ease of use. So those of you who are participating, and also just for those of you who want to simplify and streamline your inputs, you should be participating in this working group. Our work plan is review the requirements for the application. We're going to survey platforms that are used to make the 477 submissions. We don't want this to be burdensome. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We want to provide input on security and confidentiality issues. And we want to test early versions of the application. We then would develop recommendations on how to collect subscribership data beyond counts. Right now, when you submit your 477 data, it's mainly counts by service descriptor type. But there might be other ways of describing the service that could be important, and that would really be some potential new ground. Logistics, we'll have periodic team meetings. We'll work with our FCC advisors on requirements focus for 477 testing, and we'll draft our work plan really by the next meeting. So with that, any comments or questions? Great.
Okay.
You need a microphone?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, make sure you can hear me. Okay. No, but on the 477 is definitely something that's needed because currently, if you're a provider, you have 3 different sets of databases you have to go through for each customer that you have to reference back to. For a geographical location, you have to go back to census data. You have to go back to other types of data. And so literally you end up having an entire resource team going from your billing and information that you have for customer ID and location. Then you have to reference back to another. Then you have to reference back to another. Then you have to go to areas where you have service, but you don't have customers. And then you have to then do the same thing for all those tiny little thousands of blocks of areas that you have no customers in, that you just have to then pick things out. It really is time consuming. It's a large cost onto broadband providers.
Right. I think you make a very good point that the way in which it's currently done can be quite burdensome, and that there's great potential for a new form to streamline that, where basically it's something like input your customer data and then it will come back with the right report.
Well, just one other observation. I noticed you had accuracy and ease of use as your two objectives. The other thing that strikes me when we try to collect these data sets is the time it takes to access, integrate, process the data set. You might want to, if you're going to do baselining, you might want to see what sort of speed advantages you get in terms of being able to produce a final form product. It strikes me that a lot of the data we get, we spend literally months and months and months ensuring accuracy, ensuring the data comports with whatever report it's going to be integrated into. And speed of delivery is increasingly something we're focusing on in terms of getting this year's data out to the public as early as possible.
Okay, thank you. I'll note that.
Any other questions or comments? All right, very good. Thank you, Steve. Mark, you're up to talk about the first of our new working group initiatives and talk about the future of unlicensed services.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
PowerPoint slide, or should I just go on?
It'll be up.
Okay. All right, well, first, since this is a brand new group, pretty excited about it because the future of unlicensed services, in the last 10 years, unlicensed services have added over almost $150 billion worth of GDP. And almost the penetration of unlicensed services that people are using on devices such as Wi-Fi, other types of things have penetrated such a large percentage of households utilization. Last mile of broadband, DSL, almost every cable modem is now. We've seen the extremely large successful devices such as Apple iPad, which was built upon the mobility of unlicensed services that spread those through. So as we look at this, we want to make sure that as we're looking at unlicensed, the existing frequencies of 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz are getting congested with all the thousands and millions and millions of devices. So now what we want to do is look at ways to preserve that, as well as look at other types of frequencies that could be used, so that we keep this moving.
I spoke too soon.
Yes.
Searching for the deck, which should have been in his normal list. And
that's okay.
We will get it.
No pressure on Walt at all.
We can still go on without the deck if we need to. Yeah, but the growth of unlicensed spectrum in the last few years is it's moved from basically garage door openers to mobile phones, where it became an extension of internet transport. Really changed the whole metrics of unlicensed spectrum. It's created basically competitive services, both in broadband services. It's enabled just almost an unfathomable amount of new devices and technology, and we'll see more coming, hopefully. As I wait for my slide. That's okay, Paul. I had a hard enough time sending it to you anyway. So.
Has to be at least one small glitch.
One small glitch, yes.
So you succeeded. And this is the new. We were very smooth at what we did last year.
Well, this spares the clicker, because we had this hard, fast rule not to throw the clicker after the first meeting.
Yes.
Now we're even safer. Yeah.
I think you're supposed to act it out.
Yes.
Keep on talking about the slide.
Yeah, I keep on talking about that slides, yes. Yeah. But go on a little bit more, we've seen
we have it now.
Okay. We've seen entire industries now that are based around unlicensed spectrum.
How far ahead do you want me to go?
Just go back to the beginning. I'll just go from the, okay. All right, this is the work group. There's I co-chair this with Midland? Yes. And vice chair is John Brahill, and the FCC liaison is Michael Ha. Okay. All right. Go on to the next one. All right, the roadmap for unlicensed services. Unlicensed services have played an unexpected vital role in the evolution of the communications capability in providing a wireless commons for innovation. It is critically important that the Commission to understand both the potential pathways for continued evolution of unlicensed services, as well as the potential threats that continue for the continued viability of the commons. To that end, this work group will focus on 5 topics for the future of unlicensed services. 1, evolving novel applications. That sort of falls into Russ's stuff as well. The Internet of Things, which is faster, falls into another topic that Russ did. All right, new business models, i.e. managed versus unmanaged versus private, and indoor-only type of applications. And that's becoming more and more critical as you're seeing the speed increase for home video and things inside. They're starting to do AC and other types of things that are using all the spectrum. So there needs to be some type of power limitation or something put in place so that those services can still work but not affect other types of services. New candidate spectrum, bans to increase available spectrum. Obviously, can't get enough, obviously. And etiquettes of unlicensed service applications that will protect the common model. And the potential impact of present EMC limits for consumer and industrial devices to the continued growth and vibrance of unlicensed services. Okay. And then a preliminary list of people we want to talk to is unlicensed equipment manufacturers. The growth of this industry has just been amazing. We've seen some very large growth of companies that have become public, large stock on publicly traded companies moving forward. Wireless internet providers. That's another one that's become a very large movement into rural area that are using a lot of unlicensed spectrum in order to provide services in other areas. And large-scale deployers of unlicensed services, such as Comcast, Bright Networks, and Verizon, which are now deploying 2.4 or AC routers throughout. And so they're a big player in this now. So, and then new adopters of technology of unlicensed, like Ericsson, Alcatel, Cisco, the other groups that are in. And that's since the new group, there's not a lot on there. Okay. Any questions? Okay.
Not a lot, but there will be.
Okay.
Kevin.
Yeah, my question is the scope of this group. It's entitled Unlicensed Services, but will you also be considering the importance of unlicensed spectrum use in combination with licensed spectrum use? So in other words, the use of hybrid spectrum to meet scalability needs, whether the service itself is related to a company that used licensed spectrum or not.
Okay, you're talking about like cellular offloading for phones that are offloading off the Wi-Fi,
or multi-RAT or multi-RAT type applications.
It wouldn't be out of our scope. It depends on how it would affect the unlicensed part. If it's a key component to the way the unlicensed stuff, then yes.
Okay. Yeah. Good, because I think that's important. It's
okay.
It's a resource that can be used in many ways.
Okay, thank you. How we got?
Yeah, just a question. On the roadmap with number 4, when you're going to look at etiquettes, I hope that'll include looking at the pros and cons of etiquettes, and not seek to prescribe etiquettes, because
that is correct, because unlicensed spectrum, because of the openness of it, as what has allowed it to grow and flourish so much.
Amen.
Correct.
Yeah. The question was if you could, or somebody could just explain a little bit about point 5, which is the impact of EMC limits. What's the topic there? What's that about?
That has more to do with like the indoor applications compared to the outdoor applications.
So is the suggestion that current EMC limits are problematic?
Well, you're starting to see devices inside of houses using the maximum amount of transmit power that's needed, and there's, some of them are going miles instead of. Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
Julian.
Yeah. Couple of things. Very rich set of topics. Just to offer a couple of things. On identification of additional bands, we have some things in play right now, obviously. But really there's a gap, I think, although there's some niche provisions, between 5 gigahertz and the next band up is 57 gigs.
Right.
And so there's a small gap.
So, yeah.
So, at least one question is, where are the places we might look for additional capacity that we haven't looked at so far?
Well, and it depends. If you're looking at...
I really wasn't expecting an answer.
No,
to think about for the asking.
Thanks, yeah. The key thing on that is to look at, if you're looking at space for, say, for wireless broadband and things onto it, then the 5 gig and other types of things that have good propagation capabilities, those come in. As we start looking to inside houses and things, and the higher frequency, the better, really.
So part of the work would be helpful, I think, to the agency is what are the things that we might look at that we're not looking at now? Obviously we're deeply engaged in a couple of bands in the 5 gigahertz range. We still are looking at, what's in 600 megahertz and how that plays out. And then the other comment I wanted to go back to the EMC limits. It's not to suggest it's a problem, but it's been a long time since we really reviewed the limits, and we've kind of had this baseline that was established a long time ago. Some would argue it's worked, it's fine. Some would argue that because of this change in the landscape of services and operating with weaker signals and so forth, that they should be tightened. Sometimes we'll hear, well, the products today actually emit at lower levels, and so that's helpful. So part of this is to just try to understand, are there, should we just keep them the way they are? Are they fine? Or are there places that they really ought to be examined again? And if so, what's the impact of that? In other words, have we got 10 dB of headroom already? And so I think that was part of the exercise we were looking at. Okay. And I would also take a look at, are there products, for example, that we're not focused on and should be, and then what would the impact be there?
Okay.
So,
all right, maybe that would be okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Notes taken.
I just got a minor point.
Move the microphone.
Sorry. I just had a minor point talking about the gap in spectrum between the 5 gigahertz and the 57 gigahertz. We concentrate a lot between unlicensed and licensed, but there's also licensed by rule as sort of a kind of a middle ground. And I wonder if part of your work maybe should think about with caution, for the same reason of thinking about protocols, but think about too, is there a middle ground in terms of someplace between pure full licensed and fully unlicensed, and what comes to mind is licensed by rule.
There was one good example of that was the 3.65, the 3.7, and that was granted on a nationwide licensing. Basically, it was basically just sort of like it was like an unlicensed frequency, but it had a license to it, but there was no real. There was a little bit if you were working, you couldn't interfere with another person. In other words, basically, so. The problem with that particular frequency was I think that would have really taken off, but there just wasn't enough spectrum that was given with that. And I think that's why the vendors didn't jump in. They were all excited when it first came out, and they were all looking at it, but there just wasn't enough spectrum allocated, so it didn't give an advantage over their existing products that they were selling. But yeah, I think that's a great model, and I think that the 3.65 and 3.7 would have been a great example. It just didn't have enough spectrum. That's good. yes, I know. Yes.
All right, very good. Adam.
Yeah, so Mark, you had a list of preliminary sources of input. Okay. And if I were to use an example of, for example, start up with the kind of thing that you're doing with horses.
Okay.
Whenever you use the spectrum, you are neither a service provider, of a conventional sort,
right,
nor a large equipment manufacturer, but there's enough stuff to cobble services together.
Yeah.
Okay. And one of the patterns I'm seeing is a lot of industries, including critical infrastructure industries, are using Wi-Fi fairly extensively. Okay. As we keep on piling more services into that space, I anticipate a problem. Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's.
And so the question is, are you going to address that, and is there some mechanism for at least bringing some talent from those areas to be part of the deliberations, essentially?
Okay.
I'm thinking of
yeah.
things like smart grid, things of that sort, that in fact do use Wi-Fi extensively.
Yeah, the smart, 900, a lot of, yeah. Yes, the smart grid part and that fell into some of the applications, but the public safety and some of the emergency services, no, that wasn't on the list, but it will be added.
But what I would say, there seems to be a lot of what I'm going to call craft-like work that's sort of cobbling stuff together into space, and I think it would be worthwhile taking a look at how much demand that's actually creating at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Dale, back to you.
Yeah.
I was just, quickly, we had the session here yesterday on wireless test beds, and one of the discussions in healthcare, and one of the interesting discussions was about how people are using Wi-Fi for things that really are involve the safety of life and so forth. So those issues were very much teed up yesterday. So some coordination between what comes out of that workshop and what you're doing might be useful. The other thing is that two people beginning to do more objective measurements of how we all sort of say, boy, these bands are really getting crowded. But when you really say, well, what hard evidence do I have that that's the case, tends to be a little sparse. So I think there is some measurement activities that might lead. And the reason I would think that is if you're doing some of this analysis and you could do some forensics on it, what you may find out is there are certain things that are very greedy that you're talking about that are using up too much spectrum. Maybe we could start looking at, is there ways of, through education, helping design engineers make right choices and so forth. So that's something else you might want to think about is what measurements could or should or are being made on actual utilization.
I know that just as far as like the Wi-Fi routers go, anyone who's in a neighborhood who opens up their computer and looks at the amount of access points that pop up, big and growing number. But yeah, that's
everybody on the same channel in some cases,
Yeah.
So it looks congested because
well, a lot of the DSL and cable routers come default all in one channel. There,
yeah, right.
They're shipped
That's
out.
the sort of thing I'm talking about. I think.
Yeah.
Actually, you're teeing up a personal one. As you all know, I'm a professor at Illinois Institute of Technology, and I teach a class in the fall entitled Introduction to Wireless Networking and Performance. And one of the tasks that I have the students do every fall is to go out and find as many Wi-Fi access points as they can generically and as many in a single place as they can. And the numbers every year have escalated, so it's not quite the...
That would be interesting. That would be some interesting numbers, though.
It is very interesting numbers, and there's a prize for the group that come up with the most total and the most in any site. So we have, in some cases, people riding buses across the Midwest collecting, so it's tens of thousands, actually, of access points that they collect, but also in a single location. And it's quite amazing. They've discovered that in the middle floor of the Willis Tower that many of you may know as the Sears Tower in Chicago, that's the optimal location, and they can see, literally thousands of access points from that one venue.
Yeah,
which is always very scary to me. That thousands of access points with a sniffer is.
Yeah, that would be interesting not only for that, but then you could also calculate the total amount of radiating power within that distance. I bet you that would be rather surprising.
Yeah.
But let's be clear here, that doesn't prove, though, that
No,
you
no,
could
you're
take
correct.
that as saying, gee, this is working pretty well without government intervention.
Well,
so
absolutely.
So that's the flip side.
And-
of it. We got thousands
and
of
it
these
does.
darn things.
And it does work.
And they actually work.
They do work.
And people
Yes.
are making significant investments because there's all these access points out there.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful.
And there's a lot of companies who are developing products as is pushing innovation. As it starts getting crowded, they get working better at noise avoidance systems. So it's sort of an interesting growth pattern.
Yeah.
But yes,
But I'm happy to share some of this data with the group
yeah.
as appropriate
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
as it exists. The other thing along the lines of the critical infrastructure, one of the things that I've been a little startled with is the move in the smart cities world to use LED lighting in cities. And I've forgotten what the statistic is in Chicago, but it's thousands and thousands of street lights that would be, and they're all controlled through unlicensed band, which is quite exciting.
Cost effective, I guess. Yes.
And there are lots of functionality that can be provided with such lights. If there's an emergency, someone's used the blue light camera, then all of the lights in that neighborhood will flash, alerting everyone, including the police, that there's criminal activity or perceived criminal activity in that area.
Yeah, a lot of the communities have started using 900 megahertz and connecting their traffic lights together as well, too.
Right.
Cutting out that line.
So when you started speaking about the critical infrastructure being applied to unlicensed, that is happening in a very large way. So I'm hopeful that your group will be able to dig into some of those. It's a very exciting working group. It really is. So
thanks.
I look forward to future inputs.
Compliments, LED lights are also a growing noise source.
Well, that's
they are.
true too. That's different. That's a different working group.
Got the boulder and look at the grow labs, yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. That's an entirely new RF study.
I didn't
there.
say that.
Okay.
Based on experience?
Do we have volunteers for that work?
All right. On that note, we do have one more.
I have a question.
Jeff.
When your students are surveying a high-density place like Willis Tower for Wi-Fi, I assume they're looking for SSIDs. They log those.
Yes.
They log frequency, channel, and all that. Okay.
Yes.
Because what's interesting, if you have that much congestion, that small a space, how it can work with a limited number of channels available. Has anybody taken a look at how it works?
Well, no, this was spoken to earlier. It's the point of you can sense it at a much lower power level than
you can use
the utilization.
it. Yeah.
So the locality of your connection is what allows it to work. But when you look at it, at first when a student started bringing me these numbers, I must admit I was astonished. The first year it was like 18, the next year it was 150, the next year it's 500, the next year it's 1,000, and 5,000. It's quite astonishing how this has grown, but it still works, and that's the positive side.
Do they sense them even if the SSID is turned off?
Yes, it comes through with no ID.
Yeah, but it takes. Okay, so those still get counted. It's interesting.
Right. Yep, very good. All right, let's move on to the next generation internet services, the second of our new working groups.
Can you put my slides up?
They're up.
There we go.
It was only Mark that we had the delay.
Okay. So it is April Fool's, and I wanted to call out a couple things. Some of the April Fools, Google announced a new Pac-Man map for how you navigate. There's selfie shoes. There's connected fish. There's cat and dog phone plans. Honda CR-V has 10 internal cameras to take selfies from every angle, very popular with the teens. And there's a toilet awareness app that's cloud-enabled. If you don't have that, by the way, the toilet's back there. But if these were all real services, they would need QoS, which is part of the next generation internet service characteristic and feature work plan. So I just wanted to hit that. Even our pranks are now very, very steeped in technology and connectivity. And someday these things could be real. I don't know about the Pac-Man one, Milo. So when we first read the charter here, by the way, we have a very, I think, broad and wide depth of knowledge here on the working group, which I'm very happy about, and I'll be looking to hopefully get a co-chair as well. And as we move forward, because there's a significant amount of work here, I think when we take a look at the charter, when I first talked to Walter about this, I said, Walt, can you define this a little more specifically? It seems very wide. And he said, oh, yeah, it's very wide. I think we've got everything in here from QoS, cybersecurity, IPv6, the death of the PSTN, the sunset of the PSTN, 5G, you name it. So we have had a couple of meetings to narrow the scope down a bit. And I think some of the key points here that I've tried to highlight, and worked with the team on is, this statement rings true. A best effort network is evolving towards one where quality of service is a growing concern. And I'll stop there. I mean, it goes on. The other one is, the role of critical infrastructure. The network is becoming more and more critical. Anytime the network goes down, it is both financial impacting as well as safety impacting. And we talked about how public safety is even using unlicensed now. I think some of the other key points here, access future service requirements for the Internet driven by the need to provide critical infrastructure services and the transition of services from the PSTN to the IP-based platform. I think over the past 4 or 5 years, we've gone down this road of this transition, and it's definitely happening and sort of happened to some extent. The other critical point here is QoS metrics for end-to-end and network-to-network interfaces. So we've talked about a couple of things here around QoS, and so we're going to define more succinctly QoS as it relates to services on the Internet. And the other term that's come up as part of that is also take a look at QoE, or the quality of experience. So let's go to the next slide. So some of the example areas to explore, and this is not an encompassing list, and we may get rid of some items. I mean, we have 8 months, and some of these items work groups have looked at for years and not solved. So we need to be realistic on what we can really bite off and what the aspect is we'll pursue. But topics like 5G, and then video, of course, the progression of video from high definition to 4K all the way up to 16K and beyond. Looking at the impact of CDN and caching on the network, IPv6 migration, potential impacts, deterministic internet. I mean, the internet, this is not your father's internet, so to speak. I mean, and we'll get to that point a little bit later. But there's quite a few things, and we need to talk about that too, the definition of the big internet and the little internet. IoT applications clearly are driving a lot of things that are happening on the internet in terms of services. Also data virtualization, cloud services, distributed services. We threw in privacy, that may or may not fit as well. That may be part of the security work. The other piece that's critical is end-to-end encryption. As services start to become more encrypted, it does put a load or a certain QoS requirement on the network as well, and we'll explore that. And the one that's not on here, which is somewhat of a implementation, is SDN and NFV, which are part of this workflow as well. So just to take a quick look, and probably what's more interesting to most people than what's on this slide is what's not on this slide. So, June we expect to have a taxonomy on the standards, a short list on services, and basic framework around what our QoS work will be. By September, a detailed QoS and service list with impacts, and December recommendations specifically around the top QoS issues we see to advise the FCC on. So there is a good deal of prior work and some current work that we're going to leverage. There's the previous transition working groups that have done significant work around what QoS metrics could be or what may be required for access. Cybersecurity working group efforts, the previous IoT working group in terms of what those requirements are. There's also other FCC groups that I've already reached out to, like BitTag, that are working on some similar items as well. And then there's the Measured Broadband America program that takes a look at quality from a small part or slice of the network from a consumer to an ISP. And, of course, there's standards efforts, which are part of our charter as well, which include, organizations like the IEEE, IETF, and ITU. And then the current working group that Adam and Nomi are leading, that we're going to work closely with on the future game-changing technologies, because these are things we need to be aware of as we define what the services and QoS characteristics could or should be. So the next question, this is our philosophical slide a little bit, and I don't want to get too deep into this philosophical discussion, but what is the meaning of the Internet today, or more realistically, how is the Internet being consumed today, and what does that mean in terms of services, applications? There's been this comment made about best effort, and we're going to have a little more discussion around that over the top services. Should we distinguish between the Internet and specialized service? So one of the first tasks we're going to take on is getting a very deep understanding of specialized services and how that stands up with the recent ruling. Impact of new business models. This is clearly not just a technical issue, but some of the business models are driving what's being done in terms of both caching and how that affects the network architecture and the QoS parameters. And then the scenario planning, what we're looking at realistically is 3-year, 5-year, and then the 10-year horizon. I think to go beyond 10 years gets to be a little bit maybe too difficult to bring in. So again, this is a little more detailed on the TAC focus. Our viewpoint is service requirements will drive the team efforts. And what we mean by that is we're going to try to look at what those services are and what the required QoS would be to support those. Obviously, there's the existing type services we have today, voice, video, and what you could call real-time communications. And then there's the new or next-gen services, 5G, et cetera, that we need to take a look at how that will run across the Internet. Interconnection element is a critical piece as well. The Internet, and I think this is becoming more and more clear that the Internet is no longer just a best effort network. In fact, I kind of find it as a little bit of an outdated term, because how most people have, when you think about the Internet, it's very much you're buying it from a service provider. It's a managed service for the most part. So there are QoS and there's parameters that have been put in place. It's beyond it's beyond a best effort, and we need to be careful about what we call best effort. And I even think the term over the top is a little bit outdated too, because most every service that you could almost, new service is almost over the top. And I think, and I'll quote Dennis here, you said early in the meeting, the Internet is not what it used to be, and I agree 100%.
I don't think you quite phrased it that way.
Well, that is a quote. He said the Internet is not what it used to be. It's on the tape. Roll back. Also, beyond bandwidth, bandwidth does not solve all problems. There's much more to the Internet and QoS than just throwing bandwidth at it. So this is something we clearly need to advise the FCC on and dig in deeper to. Also, the cloud services impact and where cloud sits, where caching is of data, and how that affects architectures. And I think there's the business model that comes into play there, as mentioned earlier. And then, of course, we need to consider the full, list of metrics, which are jitter, delay, loss, et cetera, when we talk about QoS. The one thing that's really clear that's not on this slide, too, is the Internet today is, and I'll just put it, I've got to be careful, I don't want to be quoted on it. It's kind of a messy, the Internet's messy in a way, because it's no longer, you've got all these disparate players that connect. And there isn't a uniform, like, Ethernet plug in terms of QoS. Not even a common power plug between how you hand off QoS from one provider to the other provider. So you have this very disparate group, the Internet, nobody really owns it. So it's owned by everybody. And so you do have a challenge there in terms of how you propagate QoS and how you pass QoS from one provider to another provider. And some of the actions we have here, again, I think I've covered what the actions are, but really defining a bit more on QoS, the capacity needs, bandwidth for the effort, looking at the taxonomy on the standards, and then diving in deep on the services and the required QoSs. But sort of our guidance here is what should the Commission encourage around QoS? So open to questions.
Walt has jumped up first.
Okay.
The discussions that led up to the 2010 Internet order talked about managed services and best effort services, and sort of I think the FCC Commission, with the help of industry, because this was the discussion thread, not in 2010, but the discussions we had preceded the years before 2010, thought about the Internet in the context of a best effort service, and managed services were suggested in the areas where quality of service had to be introduced. Recently, we've been discussing quality of service issues involving the Internet itself. It would really help, I think, if you help frame out the differences between the old concept of managed services, which was premised on QoS, and how that, if it is distinguishable from Internet services that also have QoS attributes associated with them. And, to quote, a sage here, the Internet is not what it once was, and it will be something different in the future. So I think
not what it used to be.
Not what it used to be. Excuse me. And I think that's important to get the Commission to understand is where this fits in, because I remember the discussions we had 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe simplistic, but at that time nobody contemplated anything other than a best effort Internet. And now we're doing real-time video, streaming services, all requiring some form of quality of service.
It's a good point. In our meeting today, our first really face-to-face meeting, we had a discussion about managed services and what we should cover with that. And our FCC advisor, Padma, also mentioned it's an area we need to dive into, so agree 100%.
Yes, just a comment, really. I didn't see quite the list of all the stakeholders you were hoping to gather information from, but it seems to me that IXPs would be a really interesting player to bring to the table here. They normally been very neutral, but any kind of a quality of service solution, they sit at a really unique point that they could provide support for that.
Thanks. We'll definitely add that to the list.
Shahid.
Since my label was passed around, might as well ask a question here. So, Russ, I was just thinking about balloons and drones. Would you consider that as a next-gen Internet service? I don't know where Milo is, but I'm sure he'll be excited to talk about it.
Milo's in the ether.
He's in the ether, okay. He's in the balloon somewhere.
So I would say balloons could provide, or a potential to provide a type of service later, but drones I look at as consuming service, but I guess you could also use drones to enable them with Wi-Fi devices as well. So yes, that's a potential. I'm not sure whether that's a 3-year, 5-year, or 10-year plan and the realistic nature of it, but we can add that to the list. I think that we kind of want these guys to vet the services first on the next gen services, or I'm sorry, the next, what do you guys call it again? Future game-changing technologies. So that's one of the future game-changing technologies.
Rolls off the tongue.
Rolls right off.
Milo, since you've been introduced, would you like to say a word?
He's left the building. He's working on that pack
down.
He's working on that Pac-Man map.
Very good. Kevin, you were up and down.
Only to sort of answer Shahid's question that the types of things you're talking about are on the list for the future game-changing group. So.
Okay. Hang on. You're on. Oh, sorry. Yep.
I'm just wondering.
NTIA liaison.
I was supposed to be an observer, but I thought maybe I'll speak a few. Couple of things. I think there are some technologies which are listed, and I'm sure there are others. But I'm thinking, how about things like even new materials, security aspects? We know this TCP/IP is kind of in a bad shape. How about totally new kind of transport routing technologies? How about new battery technologies where you can take it for, a month, 2 months, 3 months, even for regular cell phones and stuff? So I think there are a lot of things which we can think of more innovative. QoS is just one attribute, but I think there are so many other things that we should think about.
Okay. Again, some of that might fit into the future game-changing technologies. And at the same point, this is a good opportunity. I invite others to join the working group. I think we have a fairly good-sized charter, but we definitely want to have other people's input on QoS. And even if you're not part of the working group, send us your ideas or thoughts, other than just, when we get together once a quarter. But, we clearly have, I think, QoS is, issues, or the topic has been around for years, and it'll continue to be around for years. So the more input, the more advice would be appreciated. I think there's a...
There we go.
With the emergence of vehicle-based communications, we're starting to experience something I would call mobile networks, where the multiple devices in a car are a network themselves that then the network interconnects at different points over time. And that challenges some of the models about interconnection, as well as some underlying technologies like mobile IP.
No, I agree, and I think it'll be interesting to see which way the we'll just call it the self-driving car goes, whether it's a contained system of that car doing traffic avoidance or collision avoidance, or is it an orchestrated where the cars communicate? And, again, that might be something from the future game-changing group to take a look at, but it'll definitely impact, because that is what I would call, it becomes a mission-critical type, data if it is, public safety.
Well, I was thinking more along the lines of today's, now cars are being sold with a cellular uplink and Wi-Fi in the car,
right,
but it looks like a single endpoint because of NAT. But with IPv6, it's going to be a network, and that has some interesting implications.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, good point.
No, I thought that's where Marvin was, and it is fascinating as you get to a car where you have effectively a server in the car, a network inside the car, which can in fact connect not just for the self-driving car kind of thing, but for the communications that we normally think about. And it does present a remarkably new perspective on how the network exists and interconnects. Walt wants to jump in.
Just along those lines, there's a lot of networking technology going into fleet management systems, that tractors, trailers that provide real-time information, control information, that also have some characteristics similar to. It's not just self-driving cars, but it's more commercialized vehicles that need to be managed in the field with varying degrees of communication for purposes either of control or optimization.
So you think of Amazon working without robotics in its warehouses? All connected.
By the way, Amazon also has an April 1st today. If you look on their website, they take you back 10 years in where they started from.
10 years. I started one 10 years ago.
Any other comments, discussion?
They have a retro website that lists.
Just one more small comment that continues the same thread. There are also airplanes and trains and all of the other places beyond just cars where the networks are very mobile, but they're encapsulated in some kind of a steel shell or aluminum shell that move around but then interact with the rest of the world. And that the evolution of that whole series of things, and it's good that Marvin is nodding his head. I mean, it's a very fascinating part of the world. Certainly you can put some more deference over to Adam, which you've done very effectively. But this is all part of the internet as well.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of this too is part of what I would traditionally call the Internet of Things, and we're kind of in the middle of is tractors, fleet management, asset management, all these networks, the issues of Wi-Fi in certain locations, et cetera. So, good points.
Dale, please.
Just a footnote to that.
Like the cars, interesting.
Increase the stakes dramatically, I think, in terms of interference, jamming, and spoofing too. I mean, so there's that element as well, I think.
Yep.
Just a short comment along the same lines. I was reminded of Dennis's comment. We started 16 years ago, and maybe at that first meeting we said, I bet that internet thing could be used for more than email. And just thinking ahead, aside from just the technological side, as the characteristics, latency gets reduced and starts opening up the door to other kinds of applications, where does that take us? I think that would really be useful to get those insights.
So the one thing I would like to add to Dennis's quote is, it's not what it used to be, and yet it is, because the internet has continued to be able to grow and embrace every transition we've had in technology, from email to mobile. So it's pretty robust, although what's on the internet has changed. It's still the basic internet.
So can I conclude from that Adam's work won't be titled "Sunsetting of the Internet"?
It is. Dawning of the new era.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about at lunch today.
All right, and I think that was a segue to Adam, who has been. There have been several. I'll defer that to Adam comments along the way. So Adam, I think when Walt and I put this together, we purposefully had you as the grand finale today. So.
I thought you were going to extend these meetings because 1 to 4 wouldn't work.
Well, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the Future Game-Changing Technologies Working Group that I'm reporting on. The chairs are Nomi Bergman and myself, and Nomi unfortunately couldn't be with us today. Probably all of you saw a major announcement on Bright House being acquired, so she's deeply involved in that and sends her regrets, and we wish her well and sort of going forward. Our FCC liaisons are John Leibovitz and Nanaki Nenweki and Walter, and we've had quite a few discussions with Walter at this point in time. So if I were to, let's see.
You got it there. Working group members.
Okay, I'm looking at the, right, okay. So in terms of the working group, we have, actually this is the largest working group I've seen. We have 2 pages of members at this point.
This was why I made my comment about your group.
Okay. Wants to be on it. And instead of Mr. Romana, we have Lynn Merrill, who's going to be on the group. And if you'd like to be added, subtracted, whatever your wishes are, send an email, please. Okay, so I'm not going to go and read off the rest of the group. But what I want to say is there are a lot of brains around the table. We would also very much like to take advantage of the rest of the TAC. I'm sure there are a lot of inputs that we could get, so I think I'll be saying a little bit more about that in a minute. If I look at the charter, I'm not going to go and actually read what's up there, but I think what Walter reminded us of is that the most effective thing for a working group is to have something actionable that comes out of it that can be recommended to the Commission. And at the same time, I think an important aspect of this group is that the material really be educational. And I think it's a fairly broad charter at this point. And rather than focus in on something very, very specific, I think the approach we have taken is to take a very wide view of what is happening in the technology world, what the implications are, and in the way that it might in fact affect policy making sometime in the future, essentially. So if I were to take a look at examples, I think Walter put down a few. There were things like 5G, massive MIMO, things that make the efficiency of the way we use spectrum go up by a tremendous amount, essentially. Whether it's better use of spectrum, better spatial diversity, better reuse of spectrum, that's one part of it, but also new technologies. If I were to take a look at things like satellite, there's a number of groups that's looking at what were dreams 10, 15 years ago, not practical, an impact of satellites, balloons, drones, things of that sort, on areas where it's uneconomical, I would say, to deliver broadband by some other means, essentially. Okay? So very broad on this. And I think the approach we have taken is to, first of all, start off with a request for ideas. What should be considered? What do people think of as game-changing technologies? I think we sent out one note to the whole TAC on the 8th of March. I believe we got something like half a dozen to 8 responses from the members. I think all good ideas, essentially. And then we had a first working group call just last week, and a little bit of a pre-planning session that was conducted today. And in looking to sort of producing a report at the end of the year, I think we would still like to keep the aperture for ideas open. So my first ask of either members of the FCC, our liaisons, the remainder of the members of the TAC, please, if you have additional things that you would like to see being considered, send a simple email, and we will add it to what we are looking at this point in time. Kevin Sparks put together a grand table of what was suggested so far, and try to do some degree of organization. And if I were to take a look at sort of the ideas and do a grouping, this is, by the way, fairly incomplete. There are a lot more things that were considered. But the first one really has to do with technologies that up the capability and the capacity of of what networks can do. Okay, whether it's the antennas that we talked about, MIMO, the use of software-defined networks of various kind, network function virtualization, the impact of computing on things, 5G technologies, the use of the web itself, basically anything that ups the capacity. The second set of examples is really what I would call things that are architectural in nature, technologies that would change the way the networks are put together and the way that the services are actually delivered. And the third one is one where technologies would actually change the demand in some dramatic way. So right now what we're contemplating for the group is to really do this as 3 buckets. We'll have 3 subgroups, essentially. The first one dealing with demand, new capabilities, new functionality, and we were thinking of tucking the issue of business models and things of that sort as part of that group. I would say the second group, much more technically driven, looking at what are the elements that go into building networks, the infrastructure, the devices that go into there. Again, sort of the nitty-gritty of communications. And then the third group really looking at these large-scale architectural issues. Okay? And in considering those, as I said, what we would like to do is sort of blow out the list of what we are looking at, and then go through a series of exercises where we prioritize what's on the list, maybe mention everything in the end, but really pick 2 or 3, a very limited subset, in which we will go into depth because those are likely to have the most impact. And we thought in terms of time scale from today's discussion, really look at a sweet spot of what is going to impact the world in the 5 to 7 year time frame. Not too far out, not too short term, but something that's actionable and something I think that the commissioners would actually get excited about. Okay? I would say on top of that, as a complete group, we think that there are some fundamental technologies, and this is Rangam's previous question, things like computing, storage, communications, sensors, actuators, human interfaces, the software that runs everything, batteries, all the ancillary things that are really the building blocks of what we call technologies in this previous discussion. We think as part of the education, because those technologies, as the industries that build them, all have roadmaps, it's really a good place to start off in terms of what you anticipate will have an impact in the future, essentially. Okay. I think that's a repeat, so I'm not going to go through that. But basically, what we would like to do is keep that aperture open for the next 2 to 3 weeks, and then get seriously into the process of analyzing it, gathering the material, and end up with both a report and some kind of a show and tell at the end of the year, essentially. Okay? Very exciting, very good group, and really look forward to working with the whole TAC and the rest of the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam, and in absentia, thank you to Nomi as well.
Yeah. And Nomi did a tremendous amount of work on getting this going, so really appreciate it.
Given the keen interest, I expected almost every tent card to be up, and I see no tent cards up, which is quite surprising to me.
If you put it up, you have to suggest an idea.
We're all in the working group.
You get volunteers. That's one way not to have any tent cards go up. You're all inside the tent, if you will. Okay, very good. Well, I'm surprised at that, but we'll continue on. I did want to go back, and I haven't been very courteous to those on the phone in separately identifying an opportunity for you to provide your comments or thoughts, but let me explicitly provide that invitation. I did once to Milo, but Marty, Milo, Brian, anyone else who might have joined on the phone, any questions or comments for the group at this point? I'm hearing the proverbial pin drop. So let's carry on. Adam actually made the observation. You mentioned that we have so many groups and we needed extra time, and yet we're actually finishing early today. And I think there are a couple things to be said about that. One, it was the intention after having us run over last time that we would cover a few sins. I was hoping to give you back 15 minutes to make up for the 15 minutes over last time. It's our goal to always end on time, so we're going to cover that particular sin at the end. Another particularly onerous sin that we'll cover just in a moment is not giving Julie adequate time at the end. He even had some questions that he would felt compelled not to ask because we had run out of time, but we'll give him adequate time to cover things. But the other part for this session, this is the early setting out the stakes on where things will go, and I know many of you have not had very many opportunities to meet, particularly the three new groups, and even Form 477, because of some of the software lags, really haven't had much to meet on. So we're still in the early days. I'm anticipating that we will have significant demands for more time as we move forward. The other part, though, is the obvious statement that the groups are becoming so very efficient in the way of collecting their thoughts and so focused in presenting with the great leadership that the chairs are providing, that we just get things done very, very quickly and efficiently, right? Right. So very, very, very pleased about that. Yes, no, that's the point. I am anticipating that, and we'll be talking about that momentarily. And I really do think that will be the case. We're getting a little bit of a late start on our year, this being April 1st, and we're beyond the first quarter, which is late for having our first meeting. I will declare that that's my fault. I had a wonderful 2-week trip to Israel that caused us not to meet in our normal time frame, so I thank you all for allowing my wife and I to enjoy that time together.
It was a close call.
Yeah. You know, Walt.
First vacation in how many years?
12, but. So anyway, it does put us in the position of a lot of work and not as much calendar time in front of us too. So I'm anticipating, as Kevin pointed out, as the groups really get underway, that there'll be a lot, because this really is an exciting group of activities for the year. So we will look forward to the aggressive run for the roses that exists for the rest of the year. With that, let me turn things over to Julie, as promised, to make comments. And having just been with the chairman, I'm sure he'll bring exciting news from the front, even as we've been meeting here.
No big news. Just to bring us full circle, I hope you understand that the things that you had worked on before, we take seriously at the Commission. You're seeing a whole bunch of activity that flowed directly from the TAC. Whether it's the 3.5 gigahertz item that the Commission will be considering this month, there's a multi-stakeholder group that was established by the industry that was an outgrowth of some of the work in the TAC, all of the work on the stolen cell phones, et cetera. So we really do appreciate, we know you're busy, and it's hard for everybody to squeeze in the time not only to attend the meetings, but all the work that goes on in between. But it really does matter. I am as excited as Dennis about the list of topics that we have here. I think not only are they meaningful and of interest to what the agency is working on, but I think they can be fun as well. I don't expect that as you go through these, there's going to be unanimous viewpoints. We do urge you to try to come up with recommendations, but I think it's fair if there are different points of view to offer them as well. Because some of these topics are tough. So, I think if the chairman here would say, okay, let's march ahead and get this work done. And he wasn't able to make it today, but I know he still holds close in his heart the work of the TAC. So, and thanks to Dennis for taking the time that he does, as well as all of the work group chairs and participants.
Walt, you're on.
All right, we're going to try something because of the large number of work groups. And could you put the last slide up, please? We're going to try something different going forward to try to economize on our time. The next TAC meeting is on June 11th. Dennis and I have talked about this. It's clear if we did what we did last time, we're always going to run over. So we're going to try to focus on what I would call a spotlight topic discussions for specific work groups. So I'll work with you, but we're going to try to pick a couple of groups each session that have more allocated time to talk in depth about what they're doing and the issues. And the others are, I'll call lightning discussions in terms of status updates on the work in progress. And we'll rotate this among the groups. And the other thing that we discussed was that the more intensive discussions occur at the end of the year when we're making final recommendations. We're proposing, if nobody objects, that we'd start at noon and pick up an extra hour. That avoids people having to travel, make different travel arrangements, but it gives us an extra hour. And if you can make it in for lunch, our wonderful lunch will, as usual, be there waiting for you. So we're going to try this out and see if it works, but we really think we've got to enforce time management a little bit more rigorously than we did last year, simply because the groups are so large at this point. Or pick up a wonderfully innovative strategy to cut down a discussion by having everybody on your team. Once again, Adam has pioneered an innovation. So that's what we'll try next year, and I'll talk to each of you individually, and we'll make some decisions about some of you might still be in a formative stage and might not have a lot to talk about. Some of you might have something you want to discuss, so we'll try to skew towards that. And again, thanks. I know the effort that was put in arranging this meeting, the pre-discussions we've had. A lot of you even showed up today early for discussions. Amazingly, since it's a first work group, Adam pretty much had a packed house too, so I think we're off to a good start. So thanks again.
No, I would follow on Walt's discussion, and it does relate very much to our efficiency here. Many of the working groups now meet on the mornings of the TAC meetings just as a part of the course. It's an opportunity to get together, and it does seem to be a very efficient way to continue to move things forward and give the working groups an opportunity to meet face-to-face, which is always the challenge when you're meeting on the phone for so many of the meetings if you don't yet know each other. Once you know each other, it works pretty well on the group, but having these face-to-face sessions is really pretty special. I will give one last opportunity for anyone to provide inputs, including those on the phone. Hearing none, then just a couple of my own kudos that have already been passed along, but first of all, kudos to the chairs. This is one of the things I'm being given a little bit of a hard time on, but I really like this just right down the row with the chairs straight across the table. It makes things very orderly. One of my, you're learning about my personality through this as well. You know, everything has to be in order. And it's something about this character on television, Monk. My wife has made some comments about my relationship to that gentleman, but I do appreciate that, but really appreciate all the work that the chairs have done in leading, and of course each of the members. The group that has not been recognized, and I'd like you to stand insofar as you're still here, the staff members who support the groups, the liaisons. I think only a few of them are left, but Bob, if you, I guess please stand up. Yuri. Yeah, so we do have a set. So there's Matthew. Round of applause. Yeah. No, but it is enormously appreciated. You know, in many respects, you're the unsung heroes because you do keep things going for us and facilitate the work of the chairs and in so many ways make things go and make the direct connection, so that the work that is accomplished, even beyond the actionable recommendations, are things that you pick up and carry directly into the proceedings of the FCC. And again, that's a wonderful attribute of the way things are working these days with the TAC. Appreciate it greatly.
One quick announcement.
Okay. Julie.
Rangam passed me down. I knew it came from you. Just a reminder that we have a Model City workshop on April 15th and 16th that we're really looking forward to. I think we sent out notices to all the TAC members too?
Yes, we did.
Yeah,
this is an important session. I am quite upset that I'm not able to be with it because of other commitments that were there, but it's a great and important part of what we're doing, so look forward to that.
And with that, just close out as appropriate. Wish you a very special Passover this year, or Happy Easter, as the case may be, or other events that I may not have covered, but those two in particular. And we will see you in 3 months on
June 11th.
On June 11th.
You should note they've earned a net profit of 30 minutes over.
Yes.
So Dennis is a good investment. Give him some of your time, and he'll return a profit to you.
Thank you all.